Calakmul is located in the state of Campeche in southeastern Mexico, about 35 kilometers north of the border with Guatemala. The area surrounding the former city is the dense and lively Campeche jungle. Calakmul was already a large city in the Preclassic Period. Both Calakmul and Tikal were sizable Preclassic cities that survived into the Classic Period. Early hieroglyphic texts from Stela record the probable enthronement of a king of Calakmul in 411 AD, and also records a non-royal site ruler in 514 AD. A hieroglyphic stairway depicts bound captives, their names and the dates they were captured together, with the name of King Yuknum Chan I. Although the exact context of the king's name is unclear, the captives may have been his vassals, captured by an enemy, or they may have been rulers captured by the king of Calakmul. By the middle of the 6th century AD, Calakmul was assembling a far-reaching political alliance, activity that brought the city into conflict with the great city of Tikal. The influence of Calakmul extended deep into the Peten. King Tun Kabhix of Calakmul oversaw the enthronement of Aj Wasal to the rulership of Naranjo, another Mayan city, in 546. In 561, the king, now known as Sky Witness, installed a ruler at the site of Los Alacranes. Sky Witness played a major part in the political events of the Maya region. He became the overlord of the city of Caracol, to the south of Naranjo, which had previously been a vassal of Tikal. In 562, according to a damaged text at Caracol, Sky Witness defeated Tikal itself and sacrificed its king, Wakchan Kawil, thus ending his branch of the royal dynasty of Tikal. This catastrophic defeat began a 130-year hiatus for Tikal, reflecting an extended period of dominance by Calakmul. This event is used as a marker to divide the early Classic from the late Classic. Sky Witness is also mentioned at Okop, a site much further north. The last reference to Sky Witness occurs at Caracol and is dated to 572 AD. The text is damaged, but probably records the death of this powerful king. Sky Witness was quickly succeeded by first Axelwielder, who is mentioned in a text from Zibanshi, celebrating the Katun ending of 573. First Axelwielder ruled for about 6 years. In 579, Unit Chan became king of Calakmul. Unit Chan engaged in an aggressive campaign in the western Maya region and attacked Palenque on the 23rd of April, 599, with his ally Lakam Shak, lord of the small city of Santa Elena, 70 kilometers east of Palenque, defeating Palenque's queen, Lady Yol Ignal, and sacking the city. The defeat is recorded on a series of hieroglyphic steps at Palenque, and the event initiated a long-lasting grudge against Calakmul. Lady Yol Iknal survived the battle and ruled for several more years, although she perhaps paid tribute or taxes to Calakmul. Calakmul again sacked Palenque on the 7th of April 611, under the personal direction of Unachan. Palenque was now ruled by King Ajen Yol Mat, who had gained some sort of independence from Calakmul, provoking the new invasion. The immediate aftermath of this second victory over Palenque involved the deaths of the two most important nobles of the city, Ajen Yol Mat himself and Hanab Pakal, a high-ranking member of the royal family and possibly the co-ruler. Hanab Pakal died in March of 612, and Ahen Yol Mat a few months later. Their deaths so soon after the sacking of the city suggest that their demise was directly linked to Calakmul's triumph. Palenque suffered a lengthy decline in its fortunes after this date, before it was able to recover from its disastrous war with Calakmul. The wars against Palenque may have been undertaken by Unachan in order to seize control of wealthy trade routes that passed through the western Maya region. In the early 600s, Naranjo, a vassal of Calakmul, broke away when its king Ajwasal died relatively soon after the death of Unachan of Calakmul. Naranjo was independent of Calakmul by at least 626 AD, when it was twice defeated by Karakol. Yoknun Chan may have been attempting to bring Naranjo back under Calakmul control. His attempts were brought to an end by his death in 630. In 631, Yoknun Head, the new king of Calakmul, finally regained control of Naranjo. Texts relate that the king of Naranjo was already captive at Calakmul on the day that his city was overrun, and his punishment on the very same day is described by the word kuksaj, meaning either tortured or eaten. Yoknun Head conquered another city in March of 636, although the exact site is unknown. The Khan dynasty was not originally established at Calakmul, but rather relocated there in the 7th century from another city. Calakmul experienced its highest achievements during the reign of King Yoknun Chen II, sometimes called Yoknun the Great by scholars. Yoknun Chen II was 36 years old when he came to the throne of Calakmul in 636. A significant increase in the production of stelae at the city began with his reign and 18 stelae were commissioned by the king. Yoknun Chen II was probably responsible for the construction of the palace complexes that form a major part of the site core. In 629, Tikal had founded Dos Pilas in the Petex Batun region, some 110 kilometers to its southwest, as a military outpost in order to control trade along the course of the Pashin River. Balaj Chan Kawil was installed on the throne of the new outpost at the age of 4 in 635, and for many years served as the loyal vassal fighting for his brother, the king of Tikal. In 648, Calakmul attacked Dos Pilas and gained an overwhelming victory that included the death of the Tikal lord. Balaj Chan Kawil was captured by Yuknun Chen II, but instead of being sacrificed, he was reinstated on his throne as a vassal to the Calakmul king, and went on to attack Tikal in 657, forcing Nun Ojul Chak, the then king of Tikal, to temporarily abandon the city. The first two rulers of Dos Pilas continued to use the Mutal emblem glyph of Tikal, and they probably felt that they had a legitimate claim to the throne of Tikal itself. But for some reason, Balaj Chan Kawil was not installed as the new ruler of Tikal. Instead, he stayed at Dos Pilas. Tikal counterattacked against Dos Pilas in 672, driving Balaj Chan Kawil into an exile that lasted 5 years. Calakmul tried to encircle Tikal within an area dominated by its allies, such as El Peru, Dos Pilas, and Caracol. In 677, Calakmul counterattacked against Dos Pilas, driving Tikal out and reinstalled Balaj Chan Kawil on his throne. In 679, Dos Pilas, probably aided by Calakmul, gained an important victory over Tikal, with a hieroglyphic description of the battle describing pools of blood and piles of heads. Troubles continued in the east, with renewed conflict between Naranjo and Caracol. Naranjo completely defeated Caracol in 680, but Naranjo's dynasty disappeared within 2 years, and a daughter of Balaj Chan Kawil founded a new dynasty there in 682, indicating that Calakmul had probably intervened decisively to place a loyal vassal on the throne. The patronage of Yuknun Chen II as overlord is recorded at a range of important cities, including El Peru, where he oversaw the installation of Kinish Balam as king, and strengthened the tie with the marriage of a Calakmul princess to that king. The power of Calakmul extended as far as the north shore of Lake Petén, Itza, where Motul de San Jose is recorded as its vassal in the 7th century. Although it was traditionally aligned with Tikal, Yuknun Chen II commanded the loyalty of 3 generations of kings at Cancun, 245 kilometers to the south, and supervised the enthronement of at least 2 of them in 656 and 677. King Yuknun Chen II was involved directly or indirectly in the crowning of a king at Moral to the west in Tabasco, and one of Yuknun's nobles supervised a ritual at Piedras Negras on the Guatemalan bank of the Usumacinta River. Yuknun Chen II died in his 80s, probably at the beginning of 686. When he died, Calakmul was the most powerful city in the central Maya lowlands. Yuknun Yichakak succeeded Yuknun Chen II. His crowning on the 3rd of April 686 was recorded on monuments at Dos Pilas and El Peru. He was born in 649 and was likely to have been the son of his predecessor. He already held high office before he was named king, and may have been responsible for the major successes of the latter part of the Yuknun Chen II's reign. He retained the loyalty of Kinish Balam of El Peru and Balaj Chan Kawil of Dos Pilas, and gained that of Kaktilil Chan Chak in 693, when he was installed on the throne of Naranjo at the age of 5. However, the text on sculpted monuments do not reveal the full complexity of diplomatic activity, as revealed by a painted ceramic vase from Tikal, which depicts an ambassador of Calakmul's king kneeling before the enthroned king of Tikal and delivering tribute. Just 4 years later, in August of 695, the two states were once again at war. Yucnun Yichakak led his warriors against Jasa Chan Kawil I in a catastrophic battle that saw the defeat of Calakmul and the capture of the image of a Calakmul deity named Yajao Man. It is unknown what happened to Yucnun Yichakak. A stucco sculpture from Tikal shows a captive, and the king is mentioned in the accompanying caption, but is not certain if the captive and the king are the same person. This event marked the end of Calakmul's apogee, with diplomatic activity dropping away and fewer cities recognizing Calakmul's king as overlord. The next ruler of Calakmul, Split Earth, is mentioned on a pair of carved bones in the tomb of Tikal king Jasa Chan Kawil I. He was ruling by November of 695, but is not known if he was a legitimate member of the Calakmul dynasty or whether he was a pretender placed on the throne by Tikal. The next known king used a number of name variants and is referred to by different name segments within and outside of Calakmul. A partial reading of his name is Yucnun Tuk Kawil. He erected 7 stelae to celebrate a calendrical event in 702 and is named as at Dos Pilas in that year, presumably demonstrating that Dos Pilas was still a vassal of Calakmul. El Peru continued as a vassal, and Yucnun Tuk Kawil installed a new king there at an unknown date. La Corona received a queen from Yucnun Tuk. Naranjo also remained loyal. Yucnun Tuk Kawil commissioned 7 more stelae to mark the Ketun ending of 731. A new defeat at the hands of Tikal is evidenced by a sculpted altar at that city, probably dating to sometime between 733 and 736, depicting a bound lord from Calakmul and possibly names Yucnun Tuk Kawil. After this, the historical record of Calakmul becomes very vague, due both to the poor state of the heavily eroded monuments at the city itself and also its reduced political presence on the wider Maya stage. Wamam Kawil is named at Quiriguá on the southern periphery of Mesoamerica. Quiriguá traditionally had been a vassal of its southern neighbor Copan, and in 724, Wahaclajun Ubha Kawil, king of Copan, installed Cactilil Chan Yopat upon Quiriguá's throne as his vassal. By 734, Cactalil Chan Yopat had shown that he was no longer an obedient subordinate of Copan when he started to refer to himself as Kul Ahau, Holy Lord, instead of using the lesser term Ahau, subordinate lord. At the same time, he began to use his own Quiriguá emblem glyph. This local act of rebellion appears to have been part of the larger political struggle between Tikal and Calakmul. In 736, only 2 years later, Cactilil Chan Yopat received a visit from Yamao Kawil of Calakmul, while Copan was one of Tikal's oldest allies. The timing of this visit by the king of Calakmul, is highly significant, falling between the accession of Kaktilil-Chan-Yopat to the throne of Quiriguá as a vassal of Copan, and the outright rebellion that was to follow. This strongly suggests that Calakmul sponsored Quiriguá's rebellion in order to weaken Tikal and to gain access to the rich trade route of the Montagua Valley. It is likely that contact with Calakmul had been initiated soon after Kaktilil-Chan-Yopat acceded to the throne. In 738, Kaktilil-Chan-Yopat captured the powerful but elderly king of Copan, Wajaklajun Uba Kawil. An inscription at Quiriguá, although difficult to interpret, suggests that the capture took place on the 27th of April, 738, when Quiriguá seized and burned the wooden images of Copan's patron deities. The captured lord was taken back to Quiriguá on the 3rd of May, 738. He was decapitated in a public ritual. In the late Classic, alliance between Calakmul was frequently associated with the promise of military support. The fact that Copan, a much more powerful city than Quiriguá, failed to retaliate against its former vassal implies that it feared the military intervention of Calakmul. Calakmul itself was far enough away from Quiriguá that Kaktilil-Chan-Yopat was not afraid of falling directly under its power as a full vassal state, even though it is likely that Calakmul sent warriors to help in the defeat of Copan. The alliance instead seems to have been one of mutual advantage. Calakmul managed to weaken a powerful ally of Tikal, while Quiriguá gained its independence. Five large stelae were raised in 741. Although the name of the king responsible is illegible on all of them, it has been labeled as ruler Y. Calakmul's presence in the wider Maya area continued to wane, with two of the city's major allies suffering defeats at the hands of Tikal. El Peru was defeated in 743 and Naranjo a year later, and this resulted in the final collapse of Calakmul's once powerful alliance network, while Tikal underwent a resurgence in its power. In 751, ruler Z erected a stela that has never been finished, paired with another with the portrait of a queen. A hieroglyphic stairway mentions someone called Bolon Kawil. At about this same time, Bolon Kawil was king by 771, when he raised two stelae, and he was mentioned at Tonina in 789. Sites to the north of Calakmul showed a reduction in its influence at this time, with new architectural styles influenced by sites further north in the Yucatan Peninsula. A monument was raised in 790, although the name of the ruler responsible is not preserved. Two more were raised in 800 and three in 810. No monument was erected to commemorate the important Bactuan ending of 830, and it is probable that the political authority had already collapsed at this time. Important cities such as Oxpemul, Nadscan, and La Muñeca, that were Calakmul's vassals at one time, now erected their own monuments, where before they had raised very few. Some continued producing new monuments until as late as 889. This was a process that paralleled events at Tikal. However, there is a strong evidence of an elite presence at the city continuing until 900, possibly even later. In 849, Calakmul was mentioned at Sebal, where a ruler named Chanpet attended the Katun ending ceremony. His name may also be recorded on a broken ceramic at Calakmul itself. However, it is unlikely that Calakmul still existed as a state in any meaningful way at this late date. A final flurry of activity took place at the end of the 9th century, or the beginning of the 10th. A new stela was erected, although the date records only the day, not the full date. The recorded day may fall either in 899 or 909, the latter date the most likely. A few monuments appear to be even later, though their style is crude, representing the efforts of a remnant population to maintain the classic Maya tradition. Even the inscriptions on these late monuments are meaningless imitations of writing. Ceramics dating to the terminal Classic period are uncommon outside of the site core, suggesting that the population of the city was concentrated in the city center in the final phase of Calakmul's occupation. The majority of the surviving population probably consisted of commoners who had occupied the elite architecture of the site core, but the continued erection of stela into the early 10th century and the presence of high-status imported goods such as metal, obsidian, jade, and shell indicated a continued occupation by royalty until the final abandonment of the city. The Yucatec-speaking Cajash Maya, who lived in the region at the time of the Spanish contact in the early 16th century, may have been descendants of the inhabitants of Calakmul. Calakmul was first reported by Cyrus Lundell in 1931. A year later, he informed Sylvanus Morley of the site's existence and the presence of more than 60 stela. Morley visited the ruins himself on behalf of the Carnegie Institution of Washington in 1932. In the 1930s, surveys mapped the site core and recorded 103 stela. Investigations stopped in 1938. Archaeologists did not return to the site until 1982, when William J. Follen directed a project on behalf of the Universidad Autónoma de Campeche, working at Calakmul until 1994. Calakmul is now the subject of a large-scale project of the National Institute of Anthropology and History. The site core of Calakmul covers an area of approximately 2 square kilometers, an area that contains the remains of roughly 1,000 structures. The periphery, occupied by smaller residential structures beyond the site core, covers an area of more than 20 square kilometers, within which archaeologists have mapped approximately 6,250 structures. Calakmul matches the great city of Tikal in size and estimated population, although the density of the city appears to have been greater than that of Tikal. The site is surrounded by an extensive network of canals and reservoirs. there are 5 major reservoirs, including the largest example in the Maya world, measuring 242 by 212 meters. This reservoir is filled by a small seasonal river during the rainy season and continues to hold enough water for it to be used by archaeologists in modern times. 13 reservoirs have been identified at Calakmul. The combined capacity of all reservoirs is estimated at over 200 million liters. This quantity of water could have supported 50 to 100,000 people. There is no evidence that these reservoirs were used to irrigate crops. 8 sakbe, or causeways, have been located around Calakmul. 2 of these have been mapped, 3 have been identified visually on the ground, and 3 more identified with remote sensing. Now these causeways were like roads. The causeway network not only linked Calakmul with local satellite sites, but also with more distant allies and rivals, such as the great cities of El Mirador, El Tintal, and Nakbe. Those causeways that cross swampy land are elevated above the surrounding wetland, and they now tend to support denser vegetation than the surrounding forest. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour in history of the magnificent and impressive former city of Calakmul, one of the more impressive archaeological sites in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, although it is a little difficult to get to. Previous to this video, I've put out another video detailing how I arrived at this archaeological site thanks to some new friends, and that video was published prior to this video. If you enjoyed this video, this tour in history of Calakmul, please click the like button or leave a comment letting me know what you thought. I've been in Campeche for a few months now, exploring and learning about the city of Campeche as well as the state in general, different archaeological sites, the cuisine, the people, etc. And I have a playlist with all the videos I've made in the description of this video here. I also have a playlist of the videos I made the first time I was traveling through Mexico 3 years ago, when I was bicycling through the country, checking out a lot of the popular places to visit in Mexico. That was part of a larger trip, bicycling through Latin America. I've also bicycled through Eastern Africa and Eastern Europe. And I have playlists for all those countries that I've bicycled through available on this very same YouTube channel, Hum of the Earth. And if you'd like to see an interactive map of everywhere that I went and everything that I got to see and do, I have that map available over on my website, followthehumoftheearth.com. where you can click on the different locations and see the various blog posts and videos that I've made of those places. And if you'd like to follow my continuing adventures through Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and beyond, you can do so by clicking on the red subscribe button and clicking on the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Alright, so that's going to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one.